Hello, it's nice to be here.
So, how was your experience here, School of Environment Sciences, so far?
Wonderful so far. What a beautiful college you have here. It's amazing, and I see that you have very engaged students, so it's been wonderful. And the presentations were excellent also, looking at it from institutional, personal, psychological, organizational, and also in the broad economy, and really covering the subject well.
How do you define spirituality? What is spirituality for you?
For me, spirituality really has to do with a concept of wholeness, that you are a whole integrated person, that you walk in the world with a consciousness of the interconnectedness of yourself with all things, and that in fact, because of this interconnectedness, there really isn't a separation between you and everyone and everything else. You are a part of the whole, and so there's this wholeness concept for me. And when you achieve a sense of that, which many of us move in and out of it, right? It's hard to maintain it all the time. But when you have that, you feel a deep connection. And for me personally, that deep connection is a sense of the divine. And you have a real feeling for it. And when that happens, that is a spiritual experience. And so that's what it means to me.
So it's very personal. It sounds very personal. So how does this thing can solve, if at all it can solve, the global crisis as we call it?
Well, I think it is very personal. Spirituality, the way I look at it, is personal. But if creating an environment where one can pursue one's spirituality, when one can act out of the deep integrity, the best of who they are in the sense of interconnectedness with all things, if you create an environment where that can happen, it is also going to be good for society as a whole. And I think that one of the things we often miss is we focus so much on the individual that we don't look at the big, broader systems that are out there that impede people's ability to think in terms of their spirituality. So what happens is, if you have an organizational structure, for example, that is very top-down, that where management is, kind of in the punishment reward mode, that kind of thing, or you have something like the corporation Enron, where they spoke about values, but really what they were rewarding was make your numbers and we fire the bottom 10%, so it made it very competitive. You undermine people's ability to act in the world out of their spiritual, whole, connected selves. And so we want to be looking at spirituality, even though it's, for me anyway, it's personal, it's organizational in the sense that I would like there to be organizations that make it possible for people to be able to come from their spiritual selves. And also, you have to look at it in terms of the structures of the broad economy. So the way corporate structures work now, where, like in the United States, the laws are set up so that if something benefits the shareholders, under like the laws of Delaware, for example, you have to do it, even if it would hurt a lot of people. And so we need a lot of work on the public policy side of things so that we also create this environment where people can come from their, what I always say, best self, and that best self is the one I'm talking about, the whole interconnected. And I think that students, when I talk to them about this in my class, which is called Business Ethics, it's Ethical, Social, and Political Issues in Business at St. Mary's College of California, they really respond. And so there's something deep in every person that wants to come from this place. And they don't want to have to set it aside to do well in business, right? They want it to be able to be a part of who they are. And so I think there's a real will for it to come about.
There is inherent goodness in people which they want to bring out, and spirituality can do that.
I think there is inherent goodness in most people, but I'm not going to say that there aren't some really awful bad people in the world. There are some very damaged people, but I think it's a very small percentage compared to I think most everyone. Right. We shouldn't be guided by that. We should be guided by making the environment so that most everyone can do well.
Philosophy where basically based his research on people who were lunatics. right. And then applied it to people who were sane.
Exactly, yeah.
They're still being guided by that.
And made everyone lunatics, right? Yeah. Well, you have to take into account those that are going to break the rules and so forth. You have to take them into account because a small percentage of people doing very bad things can harm the whole in a significant way. So you do have to take them into account, but we shouldn't be designing our society only around what the bad things that people might do, or only their worst instincts. So, you know, it's often said that Adam Smith, who's the father of capitalism and modern economics, it's often said that his whole concept was that everyone should pursue their self-interest in a competitive environment because it will serve the great utility. Well, it's gotten completely misinterpreted because he never was really talking about self-interest in this very greedy kind of way that it's been interpreted in today's conversation. It's been conveniently interpreted. Conveniently interpreted. That you've got that 100% right. Whereas Adam Smith, in his other book regarding the moral sentiments, starts off from the beginning saying that that where morality comes from is people's natural compassion for one another. Compassion. And then he goes on to talk about fellow feeling. And he always saw his work, The Wealth of Nations, in the context of that if you're talking about yourself, pursue your interests. That part of who you are is a person who has compassion for others.
So Michael Douglas in Wall Street. So that's the way organizations work.
You know, it's always funny that people refer to that Greed is Good for that movie when it was really Ivan Boesky who said that first. They just copied it in the movie. And so that was a real speech that was given by Ivan Boesky, who later went to jail.
So, like the organization, all the organizations are, as you said, that they are basically shareholder-centric. And when you're doing business, there's nothing wrong in being shareholder-centric. So there is a kind of conflict between the spirituality being practiced, because that's a very personal thing, and if you do it, you risk so many things in today's context, because you cannot wish so many things away. They're going to stay there for some time, for quite some time. So how do you balance it?
Well, I think it's difficult when you're in a large corporation with many shareholders and they're your first responsibility. However, one of the things that more studies are finding is that it actually does serve the shareholders if you take all stakeholders into account, that the overall health of the organization is better served over the long term if you are taking into account all stakeholders, consumers, employees, you know, your suppliers, et cetera, right? That said, I think that companies that are private and do not have stockholders have a great advantage. And there are several smaller companies compared to the large, mega multinationals who are able to create wonderful, extraordinary lives for themselves and their people. One company that I can think of is called Cliff Bar, and it's out of Berkeley, California, and they make these little energy bars that are loaded with vitamins. And so this guy had this idea of putting this energy bar together because he's a bicyclist and he wanted to make sure that there was something really good out there for people who needed energy. And he ended up building a whole company. And big corporation wanted to...
I think
there's many, yeah.
There's another corporation called Advent. they also started like this with the health concept and with a lot of organization.
Yeah, but the thing that's really wonderful about this is that the idea is that the company isn't just about the product. It's also about the life that was made for the employees, for the people who own the company, etc. And so it has a very holistic sense. There's a wonderful, wonderful book that is called Life Entrepreneurs that talks about many people who approached business this way and the kind of lives that they've created.
Respected a lot there.
Yeah.
Well, if such a program, like nobody argues the utility or the goodness of this particular spirituality thing, and one should do it, and it's a nice thing, but to implement it in practice in colleges, college like B School, where we are providing human resources to the organization, to the industry. So how to go about it? Because structuring the thing is a tall order.
So structuring the academic programming you're talking about? Yeah. Well, I think that, well, first of all, every program should have a business ethics class and course, and also corporate social responsibility, and should cover corporate governance as well, so that there's a real sense of what's at stake across personal, organizationally, and also governance structure and how that works organizationally as well. But also it needs to be integrated into the other courses. So if you're teaching finance, there needs to be not only just something about compliance with laws, but also what it means. Why is it important to the whole system that the accountants are honest, that the financial people play the game fairly, and that the whole system. I remember, let me just put it this way, when I first started teaching 13 years ago, I would tell my students, you know, if the system is not primarily honest, it will collapse. And they laughed. Well, after 2008, no one is laughing, because that's exactly what happened. In the U.S., from the mortgage brokers at the lowest level, all the way up to the people in the government, there was dishonesty, not following the rules, not looking at the papers, including the borrowers, the people who did the securitization, the bankers, all the way up and down the line. And look what happened. The system collapsed. It has to be primarily honest, otherwise it doesn't work. So it's in everyone's self-interest, ultimately, to
again,
do it
the question
well.
stays, how do you structure the question? How do you structure the academy? Because all these programs, business ethics and all these things, they've been in the curriculum, they are in the curriculum. But what happens, they just end up being another subject. And people read it, they agree with every single word of it. But as far as practicing goes, nobody does it.
I don't think it's true that nobody does it.
Not many.
No.
Not significantly.
Well, I don't know. I get a lot of feedback from my former students about choices that they make. And I really emphasize that. I say, you have to know, who are you before you get out there in the world? Who are you deep in yourself? What are your bottom lines? What place where is it that that line you are not going to cross? Said you need to know what that is before you're out there. Otherwise, you walk right over yourself, and in the end, who's there? No one. You aren't even left there. Because if you don't have your own sense of integrity, you can't even carry yourself around, right? And students really respond to that. And I think you have to speak to the heart, not just the head. It's not just, I don't just do cases and say, let's look at this. Do you think it's ethical? Do you think it isn't ethical? I think that's important too. But I really try to appeal to the heart. And I use some spiritual sayings and religious sayings for them. And I talk about this wonderful essay that the author is slipping my mind at the moment, but her last name is Fox. And it's from quite a long time ago, but it's called Your Heart's Desire. And it says that the thing that you want the most, deep, deep, deep in your heart, that is God's plan for you. And it might be something simple, or it might be something big, you need to know to look for that.
Know your
And students really respond to that, and they walk out kind of saying, you know, I need to be doing, not just think about how I'm going to make the most money, but also who do I want to be in the world? What kind of life do I want to have? What do I want my life to look like? And when you get them focused there, then they make better choices. I think part of the problem might be, though, that people that are more conscious and do want to be more spiritual and so forth, maybe they go into nonprofits and smaller companies, and I think it's hard to hold on to yourself if you're in a really large corporate structure. And I'm not a pie-in-the-sky person because I was a corporate finance attorney in the 1980s for Skadden, Slate, Meagher and Flom, one of the top 3 mergers and acquisitions firms in the world. And so I know how you can get caught up in a system. It's a wonderful firm, by the way, and the people there are honest, and so I'm not speaking down about them. But you're part of a whole system, and there isn't time to even think about what the impact is of what you're doing on everything else. And so I know what it's like to be kind of working really hard and not being very conscious, not mindful. And I wanted more of that, so I left.
So myopia is profit myopia. Profit
myopia. Right. That's a really good term, profit myopia. I like it. That's a good one.
So I think that writes it.
Yeah. I think that can happen, yes.
So can you suggest, like, coming back to the question again, how do go about it from here? School of Management Sciences, if you can suggest something, and your organization, SMS, like when you are together, like, we are all on the same side.
Yeah, we are.
Thinking alike. So what can be done from here further?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think is really important, I mean, you have to set up your program, as we've talked about, and I think you're right, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. I think we have to be activists on the public policy side of things as well, and so that's part of the work that I do. I think about the big, sort of meta structures that are in place, and how might we make some changes. So, for example, the world economic systems and institutions have bought into a kind of a stark economic liberalism that I think does not it's such a huge system that it kind of can chew people up, is a kind of a way of saying it, right? And we really need to be activists on those big levels. And institutions like this, in cooperation with other institutions around the world, we could have an impact on public policy, because people working in those large global economic institutions, and I'm not talking about multinational corporations, I'm talking about, the World Bank and the IMF and the United Nations and so forth and so on. They at the policy level, we could really hammer their doors down. We could try, and we have to try, even if it's difficult. We have to try.
Need many Davids.
Right.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you.